apart from drone strikes, does the United States have a consistent policy in Africa? It has been a Cold War arena, and the big power games are continuing, with the USA, Russia and China. So, what mistakes has the West made and is making in Africa? Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Scribble, scribble, scribble. Among the many documents President Donald Trump signed just hours after his swearing-in on January 20th was the 90-day suspension of all U.S. foreign development assistance programs for a review. In early February, Trump's head of the Department of Government Efficiency felt that the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, had become inefficient.
USAID is a criminal organization. Time for it to die.
And so the gutting of USAID began. Almost all employees are being pulled off the job and out of the field globally. In Kenya alone, at least 40,000 healthcare workers have worked for USAID. Now, under threat of dissolution, the agency's 6-decade mission has, among other things, buttressed American security via tackling starvation, injecting education with funds, and pressing to curb epidemics. All of that and more at a cost of over $8 billion a year. To the minds of Trump et al., this may sound wasteful, but some critics of the move point out that shutting USAID down may prove counterintuitive, if not counterproductive, to Trump's strategy of keeping China in check.
The US suspension of foreign aid now threatens to effectively leave the field wide open for China to expand its influence. Russia, too, may seek to exploit the vacuum created by the US retreat from foreign assistance.
Trump runs the risk of giving up even more space to China and Russia in countries such as South Africa, where their presence is already strong. Musk, born in South Africa, has been particularly vocal about taking out USAID from South Africa, a member of Russia and China-led BRICS. While China is South Africa's largest trading partner, Washington has been injecting $450 million a year in aid to South Africa, according to State Department figures. With USAID, Trump could also pull funding from the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR. Introduced by President George W. Bush, the program saved 25 million lives from AIDS, helped provide 20 million people with HIV antiretroviral treatment, and contributed to the birth of 5.5 million HIV-free babies to HIV-positive mothers. According to the country's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, PEPFAR accounts for around 17% of the country's $2.5 billion annual HIV budget. In the country of 60 million, 8 million people live with HIV. Taking USAID out of South Africa may have something to do with the 2024 Expropriation Act. In Trump's eyes, the act allowing the government to expropriate land in rare cases without compensation is an assault on property rights. The White House offered white farmers in South Africa the option to resettle in the US. The farmers have so far largely turned down the offer. Although whites are a small minority, they reportedly own around 70% of South Africa's private farmland.
Our guest today is Jan Wieliński, a career diplomat and former ambassador of Poland to many, many African countries. Welcome to the programme.
Hello to you, hello to everybody.
Great to have you. We'll start off with the latest strikes, the drone strikes by President Trump in Somalia, and it's been labelled as America's everlasting war, eternal war. They've been here since the 1990s, probably even before then. We spoke a bit earlier about the intervention in Somalia in the 1990s, President Clinton. And what's your take on this, on the American policy, not just to this region of Africa, but just generally will to expand upon American policy within Africa itself? So what's
militarily, American policy is correct. They are trying not only to strike against enemies, which are not only American enemies, because Al-Shabaab is not against America, it's generally against all the Western countries, against European Union. So the strike was very correct. Additionally, they have very close ties with Al-Qaeda. practically they pledged their loyalty to Al-Qaeda in 1212. And some people say that many instructions where to bomb, where to put the truck with explosive is from Al-Qaeda, but Al-Shabaab youth only executed. Because these are young Sunni terrorist militants who are paid for executing different strikes. So in this sense, militarily, the intervention of America is in the interest of security, and I will fully approve it. Additionally, as you remember, this region is a falling state, so you cannot control it properly. So by the strike, at least you are trying to control the situation and eliminate these terrorist people and give the time what to do further, how to secure this area for those people from a federal Somali government who want to live in peace. Very additionally, we have a UN African operation, mostly composed of Kenyan soldiers, who are also helping the federal Somali government. So this strike is also helping them to be there in Somalia and to protect the federal government against Al-Shabaab attacks.
The whole sub-Sahel region seems to have fallen under the Islamist sway. Is that something that America has missed to try and control, to intervene, or is it too late?
No, I don't think it is too late, but it's difficult to control all the countries. Additionally, some of the countries consider that they cannot go too deeply into the cooperation because immediately they become the target of Al-Shabaab or any terrorist organization. That's why it should be the first stage to convince them to cooperate. But Americans are providing not only military strike, but military assistance. And it is also very important group of steps taken by US government, providing the training, sending the officers who are helping the military forces of their countries. I am talking even about the Mauritius, Seychelles, Tanzania, Uganda. So it is cooperation not only military, but in training the forces. It is segment of military, but not a simple military strike.
So what's your chief criticism of the US policy? You say that militarily it's a correct response, but you mentioned before your criticisms of the
sometimes I think Americans may miss some judgments. For example, coming to Somalia, as you remember in 1991, it was Americans who toppled Siad Barre. Why? Because he had disagreed to offer the base to Americans, but instead of it, he has offered to Russia. And I talked with some of his officers, and they told me it was simple. The offer of money by Russians were much higher than Americans. That's why General Siad Barre decided to accept a Russian offer.
So it's a question of who you bribe with the highest...
Sometimes, yes, in Africa, yes. It's not a secret, but when you are providing even the aid, this aid is going to a president of a country. Yes. Partly. I am not saying about each African country, but in many countries.
But the Western approach, the values-driven approach, seems to not be working. It's a pure transactional thing. They've been kicking out the French from that area, from the Central Africa. Is this part of this idea that you said before we came on air? The colonial idea, the neo-colonial idea, has disappeared, and it's this values-driven human rights agenda which seems to lead the West into not being able to understand the African mentality.
I fully agree. let us say, we need to adapt, we need to create a new policy towards African countries to better understand them. Additionally, first to establish friendly relations with the leaders, African leaders, and especially try to understand who is a future leader and try to talk to him and advise him how should the country be run by him once he will be the president. You know, Africans like to talk. Africans like to talk. In Africa is very popular, discussion of a wise man. The old people are sitting and discussing, drinking beer, and they like it. So you need to approach them. Additionally, you need to treat them as an equal. It's very important for African dignity. I met a lot of presidents. With many of them, I was a friend. My latest friend was late President Kenneth Kaunda, who has passed away 3 years ago. We met on several occasions. I like him very much. We have a lot of discussion. I was interested because in Rhodesia, there was a part of a movement from South Africa. The bases were in Northern Rhodesia. So for me, it was a part of history. And I think that we created the understanding, despite the fact that I was white and he was black.
Is this something that Russia and China, both of the consistent players in Africa, do better than the West? They not only provide the money, the brute force, the Wagner Group and military force, but they also treat the Africans as equal. Is this an accurate picture?
To a certain extent, I will agree with your opinion. And additionally, they are training a lot of diplomats whose specialty is Africa. So they have a lot of advisors, what to do, how to do, and to a certain extent, seems to me that they are doing less mistakes than we, Western countries and European Union.
Is this because you say that the problem is money? Or not the problem, but it can be a problem.
One part is the money.
The idea of just giving aid to Africa, billions and billions of dollars since the Cold War, 1960s.
I think that we are providing the aid which not always helps Africa. And this is also our problem. And Russians, in this respect, are a little bit better. They are trying to locate the loopholes and simply to seal them. That's why. Additionally, they also do a lot of propaganda. We have this, we have that, and people are listening.
Well, and
even if it is not true, but people are listening.
Yes. I mean, you see the Russian flags in the Western Sahel being brandished. South Africa, to return to this idea of the USAID, South Africa has criticised the United States. If you don't give us aid, we won't give you the minerals. And it seems that America can do nothing right anyway, because on the one hand, it's African elites, corrupt African elites, expect aid to flow in, and yet hate the United States. They can't win, can they? The Americans.
You need to find out the way how to reach. Simply to explain to them. I always used to say, okay, if we will bring you the aid, we'll bring you also the equipment, and we can have these minerals together. You are not because many African countries, they don't know the channels. Okay, they have minerals, but how to sell them? You need to create the channels. We'll teach you, you will be part of the whole process,
Yes.
So we need to cooperate. But seems to me that our conviction is not so deep, and sometimes we are the loser in the process because we are not in a position to convince them that what we do right.
Yes, we seem to have been playing the wrong game in the sense of they don't like the West, and so they're just going to go to other powers.
Yes. Additionally, you have the example of Kinshasa, the attacks against the Western embassies. So sometimes it is extremely... During the first, attacks some weeks ago, there were even the attacks against the Polish embassy. But we do not have a Polish embassy in Kinshasa. So it was a little bit funny to see the slogan.
What as a diplomat, you spent many years in Africa.
Yeah.
What was the magnet that drew you to the place, and what was your experience as a Pole, not just as a white European, but as a Pole, gave you in understanding your job?
I was always fascinated by Africa, by African history, by African geography, by African life. Africans are never in a hurry. We in Europe...
Yes, you throw away your watch, don't you, when you're in there?
In Africa, they say pole, slowly, mañana. So you do not have a heart attack, you have another sicknesses. And always, you need to find a way how to convince African to the position you want him to accept. Sometimes seems to me that Western diplomats are coming to the president and say, Mr. President, the position of my government is like this, and I want you to accept. It will never work. I used to talk to them even in the difficult situation, saying, okay, Mr. President, I think that you have so many tasks that you have forgotten about the problem. So I am here just to remind you. But please rethink again, and I am sure you will find that we can find a common position in this problem. So you need to treat him with dignity as a very equal person.
Yes, it's a total different power relationship, isn't it?
For me, it was always important. In every country, when I was posted, I had maintained a good relations with the highest level,
yes.
Despite the fact that I wasn't ambassador at the beginning. But I was, talking about the history, geography. When I visited the president, we always have a common subject.
A final question to you, Ambassador. Do you see again, we're treating Africa, this huge continent, as one unit, but do you see, how do you see the political landscape changing in the next 2 or 3 years, or is it going to be more of the same that we're used to seeing on our television screens?
I think that if we do not change our policy, we are going to be the loser. We need to work out a new policy towards Africa, to talk to the young people. You should understand that presently almost 50% of the population, right now people are saying that we have 1,500,000,000 people in Africa, and 50% there are young people. So you need to find the way how to show them that you want to cooperate through internet, TikTok, different with Instagram, everybody wants to learn computer. In many African countries, for example, when you have no possibility or access to the bank, you can pay by phone. Even in Kenya is the system, for example, that if you are driving and stop as a light and there is a beggar, so he will show you a telephone, you will pick up how many Kenyan shilling you want to give him, and then you do the operation telephone to telephone.
Yes, the technology may revolutionize the continent.
Yes.
Ambassador Wieliński, thank you very much for joining us. A great pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's all we have time for today. Join us next time, Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, 2:15 p.m. CET. See you then.